Hey there, Math Aces, and welcome to Mr. Ace Math. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about adding decimals. First, let's go over the video breakdown. There are 6 parts to this lesson, and in the description below, I've got this exact video breakdown with timestamps to help you go to any part of the lesson. Feel free to use it to go to whichever part you need. First, we'll go over how to add decimals. Then we'll go over 2 examples, followed by the pause and practice. This is where you get the chance to answer some questions on your own. After the pause and practice, the answers will be revealed, and then finally, we'll have the reflection where we go over what we learned from this lesson. But in order to be successful, here's the stuff that you should know. First, you should make sure that you're comfortable with adding multi-digit numbers. And second, you should be comfortable with decimal place value, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and so on. So make sure you know those, and let's get started. Let's start with the most important thing. How? How exactly do we add decimals? Well, the first thing we should do is line up the decimal point. And why do we do that? Well, that's because when we do that, it helps to line up our place values. So for example, let's say we have 8.75 plus 2.3. And let's clear our workspace too. Let's put 8.75 here and 2.3 here. In the value 8.75, we have 8, which is the ones place. We have the 7, which is the tens place. And we have 5, which is the hundredths place. And in the value 2.3, we've got 2 in the ones place. And we've got 3 in the tenths place. Well, if we treat this like any regular addition problem, we'll just stack the numbers one on top of the other. But here we have the ones place, here we have the tens place, here we have the hundredths place. But look, the hundredths place is lined up on top of the tens place. This tenths place is just over a decimal point. The ones place values are barely lined up, which means can we add this? Not at all, because the place values aren't lined up. But if we line up our decimal points, then we're good. Because when we do that, it helps us line up our place values. And when the place values are lined up, we can add our hundredths together, we can add our tenths together, and we can add our ones together. And everything is exactly the way it should be. And look, our ones place is lined up, our tenths place is lined up, and our hundredths place is lined up. And now that everything is lined up, now we can start adding the way we're supposed to. Since our decimal points are lined up in the question, the best thing to do is to start by placing the decimal point in our answer directly under the ones in the question. So we'll place the decimal point right here. Now that that's done, we can start adding. And you see how we have this blank spot here? Instead of leaving it blank, we can put a 0 there. And that's called annexing a 0. Basically, you're putting the 0 in as a placeholder so that all your columns are lined up nicely and evenly. And now that everything is lined up, we can finally start adding. 5 plus 0 equals 5. 7 plus 3 equals 10. So we'll bring down the 0 and carry the 1. 1 plus 8 equals 9. And 9 plus 2 equals 11. So we'll put that here. And since there's no other columns, we're done. And our sum is 11.05. Although the proper way to read this is 11 5/100. Here's our first example. But before we start example 1, let's go over how to add decimals. Step 1 is to line up the decimal point. And remember, that's done because it lines up our place values. Step 2 is to bring down the decimal point. Because once the decimal points are lined up in the question, we should bring down the decimal point to where it should be in the answer. And finally, we should annex any zeros if necessary. Remember, this third step might not happen. If you don't have any blank spots, you won't need to annex any zeros. Here's the example itself. 3.92 plus 4.7. Let's start by writing 3.92, and then we're going to write 4.7, but remember to line up that decimal point, because when the decimal point is lined up, it lines up our place values. So first, let's put the decimal point directly under the decimal point in the question. So we'll put the decimal point right here. And since we have a blank spot, we can annex a 0. So let's put a 0 here. And now let's add. 2 plus 0 equals 2. 9 plus 7 equals 16. So we'll bring down the 6 and carry the 1 to the next column. 1 plus 3 equals 4. And 4 plus 4 equals 8. Making our final answer 8.62. Although the proper way to read it is 8 62/100. And here's our last example. 39.7 plus 14.051. Let's start by writing 39.7. And next, we'll write 14.051. But remember, we must line up the decimal point when we do it. So when we do that, it'll look like this. 14.051. Since our decimal points are lined up in the question, let's make sure we write a decimal point right under it in the answer. And we have 2 blanks here. So we can go to step 3, which is to annex zeros. So we'll annex 1 0 here on top of the 5, and another one here on top of the 1. Now that we're all set up, we can start our addition. 0 plus 1 equals 1. 0 plus 5 equals 5. 7 plus 0 equals 7. 9 plus 4 equals 13. So we'll bring down the 3 and carry the 1. 1 plus 3 equals 4. And 4 plus 1 equals 5. Making our final answer 53.751. And the proper way to read this is 53 751/1000. So here's your pause and practice. Just pause and practice. Hit the pause button and try these questions. Once you're done and you think you have everything right, hit the play button to see if your answers are correct. Ready, set, go. So let's go over our answers. Number 1 is 8.97, properly read as 8 97/100. Number 2, 40.9, properly read as 40 9/10. Number 3, 28.69, properly read as 28 and 69 hundredths. Number 4. 16.01, properly read as 16 and 1/100th. Number 5. 134.64, properly read as 134 and 64 hundredths. If you got these first 5 correct, make sure you share this with a classmate. Number 6 is 15.33, properly read as 15 and 33 hundredths. Number 7 is 12.109, properly read as 12 and 109 thousandths. Number 8 is 11.11, properly read as 11 and 11 hundredths. Number 9, 61.54, properly read as 61 and 54 hundredths. And number 10, 27.97, properly read as 27 and 97 hundredths. So how'd you do? Did you get all 10 right? If you did, type pause and practice pro in the comments. So what did we learn today? The main rule for adding decimals is to line up the decimal point. The reason for lining up the decimal point is to line up the place values correctly. When you place a 0 in for a place value that has no number, that is called annexing a 0. After you line up the decimals, you must 1. Bring down the decimal point in the answer, and 2. Annex any zeros needed. So if you have any blank spaces, make sure you put a 0 in those spots.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Questions? Comments? Leave them down below.
And thanks for using Mr. Ace Math. Don't just pass math, ace it.